vote against it?
Well, I'm really glad we were able to put it into place.
Yeah, but if you're that glad about being able to put it into place, again, why did you, as Health Secretary, vote against this?
Well, because the reason that I'm glad now is because we've been able to sort that out and put it in place.
Well, the reason you're glad now is that you got shamed.
No, thanks to you.
Let's be honest, you got shamed into it by a football player, a young football player with a conscience, who managed to prick the conscience of you and the government. Do you regret now, given how glad you are that it's now happening, do you regret voting against it?
Well, of course, I'm pleased that we're making sure that.
That wasn't the question. I just asked if you regretted. But hang on, it's a very important question because you wouldn't have done it without Marcus Rashford campaigning. My question for you is, given how glad you now are that it's happening, do you regret voting against it? It's a yes or no.
Well, as I say, I'm really glad that it's happening.
But do you regret it? Do you regret voting against it?
Well, I'll put it this way. In the first lockdown, we took this action. And now, as you say, we're in
Health Secretary, you only have to say yes or no, whether you regret it. You either regret it or you don't.
Well, I'm really glad that the situation's been resolved.
So you regret voting against it?
I'm really glad it's been resolved. We've sorted it out. And I'm going to use my own words to describe my own feelings on this one.
So you won't answer the question?
Well, it's that I'm answering the question, and I'm really glad that we've sorted it.
Well, that's a great question. Have you offered your resignation to the Prime Minister at any stage of this pandemic? Yes or no?
Our focus, my focus, is making sure that children get the best remote education while they're not in school.
You're the Education Secretary. I expect it to be. But have you offered your resignation?
Our focus is making sure that children return to school at the earliest possible moment. And Piers, the other thing that we're doing,
is there a problem on the line? Can you not hear me?
Mr.
Williamson, you seem to be totally ignoring me. I'm just asking you a straight question. Given the level of failure in your reign as Education Secretary in this pandemic, given that 92% of teachers in England want you to go, given that you're being described by the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats as the worst Education Secretary in British history, I simply ask you, have you looked in the mirror and thought, you know what, I've done a terrible job, I'm going to say to the Prime Minister, it's time for me to step aside and let somebody more competent take over. Have you had that conversation with yourself, and have you then had it with the Prime Minister?
Piers, my one focus is making sure we deliver the very best for all children. We know what your focus is. You're
the Education Secretary. The problem is your focus has not proven to be very good, has it?
We're dealing with a global pandemic where we've had to make decisions at incredible pace, decisions that none of us would have wanted to have taken.
You've made a series of bad decisions, Education Secretary, decisions that have had huge ramifications for teachers, for students, for parents. You've been a catastrophe. Own it.
So our focus is always about bringing children back into the classroom at the earliest possible moment when the advice is that we can do so.
You're saying, as a fact, as Home Secretary, these 400,000 crime records, which we have all assumed have disappeared, you know for 100% certainty they exist elsewhere, and therefore there's nothing to worry about.
The other thing is we have not said that they have completely disappeared. This is down to software. They could still be in the police national computer.
Yeah, but you don't know that, do you?
Well, fingers crossed you can find them.
This is very serious.
This is a software issue.
400,000 crime records, Home Secretary, is a very serious matter.
Yeah.
It is a serious matter, which is why we are trying to retrieve this data at pace and working with software.
Okay. If you don't find them,
night and day to retrieve
if you don't find them, having just told us that they exist elsewhere, if you never find them, will you resign?
We are working night and day to bring these records back.
That wasn't my question. My question is, if you don't find them, will you resign? I have already
told you, Piers, we are working night and day with our engineers.
I know, but if you don't find them, having just told us that they exist elsewhere, if you don't find them, will you resign?
It's my imperative to make sure we secure this data.
And if you don't, will you resign?
I've said it's our imperative and my imperative as well. As Home Secretary, to keep the public, but also to find this data.
The answer is you don't take a test on the border because it's pointless.
So the answer is zero.
So the answer is zero.
I know that, Piers.
Right, so
I'm listening to you, my friend.
You can laugh, but let me explain why I think it's not a laughing matter. Right, but hang on. So you've just confirmed what Michael Gove didn't know, which is the truth. It's zero. We don't test people at any of our border when they come in. Secondly, We have never required anybody to have a test and to test negative before they get on a plane to our country, unlike almost every other country in the world. And I simply ask again, why? Why, given that we know many people must be coming in every day who probably have the virus?
Because if you ask the scientists, Chris Whitty and Jonathan Van Tam, they'll tell you that test at the border is near pointless, because that person may be showing no symptoms, may test negative, and 2 days later
So
be
why
positive.
do other countries insist on us taking
They don't
tests
insist
before
on
we
that.
fly?
They insist on a pre-test 3 days before, between 3 days before.
Why don't we do that?
All I'm saying to you is the Secretary of State for Transport is looking at all these things.
No, I'm just asking you, as a government minister in charge of vaccination, to try and thwart the virus. Why have we never, throughout the pandemic, required people to take a test and test negative before they fly into this country? I just don't know the answer. So
Well,
10 months
to
into
do
the
those kind of
pandemic is not a good
comparisons.
point to say, why have we got the worst death rate in the world?
Look, I appreciate how frustrating it is, but no, I still don't think it
It's
is.
not
That doesn't
frustrating.
mean
I'm
it-
just
but that doesn't
wondering
mean
why
it's
we have the
acceptable in
death.
any way.
I'm just asking you for one reason why we have the worst death rate in the world right now. You must
But
have
that's
you
the
must,
point.
as a
But
government.
the direct answer to your question, Piers, if you look back, is what I said at the very beginning of this interaction. We can't answer that question at the moment.
So
because
you
we're
have
not
no
at the
idea.
other
So
side
this
of
is
the virus.
okay. Well, let me take you at face value. So you, as the UK government, have absolutely no idea why we have the worst death rate in the world. None of you. None of you have got a
Well,
clue.
because as I said,
How reassuring is that for us?
You can't do that because you can't do that kind of direct comparison at the moment because
You
the
do
way
it every minute of the
different
day
parts
on
of the world.
vaccines. You can do
Yeah,
it.
but as I say, Piers, there's a difference with vaccines. That's a very clear decision around.
the only
what
difference is
supply
you don't
you've
want to
ordered
talk about
and
the
how you
negative.
are rolling it out. Well, no,
But
as
you-
I say, I think it's about how you're rolling it out and how you've secured your supply in
Right,
the
so
first
where
place.
do you think
and
we are?
How
Where,
you've gone through that process
if you
of
think the
approval.
death rate chart is wrong, where do you think we are then?
I didn't say it's wrong. I said it's too early to draw a direct comparison on something like
Too
that. with
early.
other
We're 10
countries
months
around the
into a
world.
pandemic.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but the pandemic is still moving around the world.
Yeah, this is
It's
based
still
on the
having
last
different impacts in
7-day
different places.
average. So this is happening in real time. I'm not asking you to justify what happened back in March, April last year. I'm simply saying right now, over the last 7 days, we are the worst death rate in the world. And so far, you've not given me a single reason to explain why we have the worst in the world. I applaud you for giving us some reasons, because
Yeah,
none of your...
that's the first time we've heard a
none of your-
government minister
none of your
settle
colleagues-
on a couple of explanations.
Right. None of your colleagues last week could give us any. So you've given us two now, ageing population and obesity. So are you saying that the reason for us having the worst death rate in the world is because of the public? They're too old and they're too fat.
I think that's a very insulting thing that you've just said.
You just said it.
I'm
said it.
conscious that there's a variety of factors which will have led to people sadly being ill during this time, sadly that translating into deaths. I'm conscious that this is a very serious impact. Our own Prime Minister was in hospital in intensive care himself last April. I'm conscious that we are wanting to make sure we have a wraparound support.
Sorry, what
for
did you
people,
find insulting,
which we have done
Ms.
throughout
Coffey?
this
Out of
pandemic.
interest, what did you find insulting?
Piers,
You
I
said
also need to
said
point
two
out-
reasons for the fact we
I
have the
also
worst
need
death.
to point out that you
No, but
started this interview late. Unfortunately, I have to go to other broadcasters as
Okay.
well. And I wish that we'd had more time when we were.
Well, you can
due to
come back
start at
anytime, but we
8:15,
haven't
but
seen
I
you.
appreciate that.
I haven't.